What's going on, everyone? So I've had many requests for a Hera list, and I'm happy to present my 5-color Hera list. We got yellow, green, blue, and red inside the deck, as well as heroism cards. It's a pretty sweet list. The advantage of Hera is slim, and I will say that at the beginning. I don't think Hera is a particularly strong leader, but the thing that she does allow is to play this a really, really nice Spectre synergy package that you could not do in any other deck and play on curve still. Outside of that, we are playing the green-red Rebel package inside the deck, which has been known to be extremely strong since all the Spectre cards are also Rebel cards, with the exception of one. As well, every single thing that we see here has some really, really sweet synergy going on, and we got to dive in talking about Hera. So, honestly, there isn't too much to talk about Hera because Hera's action or Hera's unique ability here relates to all the other cards that we can play. So when we're talking about, the Spectre cards, that is the advantage we get, is that we could play all the off-color Spectre cards that synergize with each other. Her backside is the only real thing that we can talk about in terms of Hera herself, is basically like a weaker Tarkin, in that while she is a better body, she's a 4/6, she comes down a turn later, and she can give experience tokens on attack to another unique unit. Now, all of the Spectre cards, which we'll talk about in just a moment, are unique, as well as a few other cards in the deck. But honestly, there are many games where she's just a little bit too late and she isn't super impactful, even if you do get to attack. It's really all about her aspect penalty ignoring that's really exciting. We are running red as the base or the secondary color of this deck. I did go with Tarkin Town, but there are matchups where you definitely want that 30 HP. Tarkin Towns does synergize really well with some of the cards that we have in the deck, so that comes into play quite frequently. But as we go ahead and dive into the deck, I want to start us off by talking about the actual payoffs that we get from Hera herself. So as I mentioned earlier, there isn't much to talk about Hera, but there is when we consider what she brings to the table when it comes to Spectre cards. Now, there's actually a 7th Spectre card, but I'm not going to talk about that until we get to the sideboard because we're playing it in the sideboard. But we can play the yellow and blue Spectres in this deck because of Hera's ability. Now, in the future, when we consider future sets, we could see future Spectre units, and it can be the other Ezras and Sabines and Choppers and Zebs and such. We will definitely see like Jedi Ezra, and we will definitely see like Blind Kanan or something like that in the future. But for right now, we get to play Kanan, the Ghost, Ezra, and Chopper without paying additional for their specific resources. For Chopper, really powerful 1-drop actually, in that it cost 1, specifically against Boba and Iden and very much any event-oriented deck, because you can really make them play off curve in your advantage. And it oftentimes is just a 2/3 when it's attacking, which is actually really nice on turn 1. Of course, we have Sabine in the deck. Everyone knows how powerful she is. We will oftentimes have the 3 aspects among other friendly units because we're playing yellow and blue cards in our lineup here. So we can go turn 1 Chopper, turn 2 Sabine, things like that. Or we go turn 1 Sabine, turn 2 Chopper plus Battlefield Mariner and things like that, where we just have these aspects so that she can't be targeted. We have Ezra in the deck is a 3/4, nothing too crazy in terms of stats, but he does give us a little bit of card selection and action cheating because we can play it off of the attack, which is kind of nice. 3 copies of Kanan here. This one's actually really powerful. A 4/5 is extremely good in the aggro mirror, as well as just being a nice statted unit that also has essentially restore 1.5, as you will be restoring most often 1 to 2 based on the aspects that you're hitting. Keep in mind that even if you have Chopper, Sabine, and Ezra on the battlefield, you don't get to heal for each card. It's discard 1 card for each friendly Spectre unit and heal 1 for each different aspect. So even if you have Sabine and Ezra on the battlefield, there's a chance that you'll hit 3 aspects, which is pretty nice. So you restore 3, but most often you're going to restore 1 or you're going to restore 2, as you'll have maybe 1 other Spectre on the battlefield, We have Zeb in the deck. It's a 5/5, which is pretty nice. And, well, it's just a nice value unit that if you do go ahead and complete an attack and kill something, you get some really major value. And lastly, one of the bigger payoffs is we have a 5/5 space unit in the Ghost that gives you a shield to whatever Spectre you want. If you get that shield token on a Zeb or a Kanan, this can be really annoying for your opponent. It's also just a 5/5 with shield in space. It actually trades evenly with a Fet's Fire Spray, although it takes an extra turn, which is pretty nice there. So really powerful set of units. And, well, important to note that because the Spectres are the Phoenix Squadron, for those of you that don't know, they're part of the Rebels TV series. They are rebels. So we get to play the Rebel package that we know and love, and that's where we're going to start off the actual deck in the ground units. So starting us off here, as I mentioned, we have 3 copies of Chopper. We have a full playset of all the Spectre units in order to take advantage of that consistent synergy. Chopper, we already mentioned, but really good against the event-oriented decks. 2, 3 for 1 resource, pretty solid. 3 copies of Battlefield Marine, just one of the best statted units for its cost in the entire game. Trades up with many different turn 1 plays, or just gets in for 3 damage if you want it to. 3 copies of Sabine. Again, just a really nice statted unit. Oftentimes attacks for 3 or even can attack for 2 and hit their base. And it's oftentimes untargetable in this deck, which is pretty nice. 3 copies of Ezra. Really nice card selection, as well as ability to generate a little bit of action cheating, but is a 3/4, so not insane, just a nice solid unit. Fleet Lieutenant, 3 copies. We're gonna have a rebel on turn 1. All of our plays on turn 1 are a rebel, so we can easily curve out into a Fleet Lieutenant and attack for a lot. With Battlefield Marine, Sabine, or anything like that, this is a 5 damage attack, which is really nice. Echo Base Defender, just 2 of, not the full 3 of, even though it's really powerful because we're playing the 3 of Ezra Bridger, as well as other 3 ofs in the deck at 3 costs. We have actually a lot of 3 costed units in the deck. Really nice against the aggro matchup, as they have to target this, and it will oftentimes just trade with whatever they're playing. 3 copies of K2SO, just a really powerful 4-drop in that it's going to hit them for 3 damage if they kill it, or you could just, make them discard. I oftentimes hit them for 3, but, can be useful. 3 copies of Kanan, as we mentioned earlier. Nice little 4/5 with Restore 1.5. 3 copies of Zeb, and that finishes off the ground units. Let's talk about the space units. So starting us off in space here, we have 3 copies of the Green Squadron A-Wing, just a 3 power on attack space unit, which oftentimes will trade up with basically every space unit in the game, with the exception of, someone else playing an A-Wing on turn 1 and them killing your A-Wing, which could be pretty brutal, but it basically is just a very powerful initial turn 1 play. 2 copies of Red 3. I tried the full 3 of, but we have so many 3-drops, and I actually prefer some of our other 3-drops, such as Fleet Lieutenant and Wing Leader. And because we're playing Ezra, I didn't want to overload on 3-drops because it can get a little tricky in the deck, but 2 of, very nice if you do get one of them down, as it is a unique unit, and attacks for 3. 3 copies of Wing Leader. I very much like this card because it helps our Spectre units survive, and if you do happen to have additional Spectre units, well, we want them to survive because we have later payoffs in Hera, the Ghost, and of course things like Kanan or Chopper, and so Wing Leader actually becomes extremely valuable. We have 1 copy of Bright Hope here, as it's just a nice sentinel body, can help return something like an Ezra, Sabine, or something like a Fleet Lieutenant for a little bit additional value, but just the 1 of, as it is just one of the many space units that we have, since we have 3 copies of the Ghost, as this will really power up something like a Kanan. Kanan is the ideal, or Zeb are the ideal ones that you want to get that shield token, because oftentimes Zeb is a target, because if you do complete an attack with Zeb, man, is this a lot of value. And Kanan, if he sticks on the battlefield, you probably are going to win the game because he trades with so many units so well, and he just starts restoring, which is pretty impressive. So really powerful unit in the Ghost, and comes down the same turn as Hera, which is pretty relevant since you can turn the Ghost into a 6/6, which then trades 1 for 1 with the Fet's Fire Spray. Something to consider if you are fighting that deck. Let's talk about the events that we have in the deck as well. Many 3-ofs in the deck. We're going to start off with 3 copies of Metal Ceremony. Once again, another fantastic card to play on all of your rebel units that are attacking. Chopper, Sabine, Ezra, Kanan, Zeb, all those guys work great with Metal Ceremony. 3 copies of Rebel Assault, mainly because everyone in the deck is a rebel. There is not a single card in the entire list that is not a rebel. Every single card works with Rebel Assault. It's just a very nice action cheating combat trick that just gets in for a lot of damage. 3 copies of For a Cause I believe in. This is 100% hit rate. You will hit 4 damage every single time because every single card is a heroism card. So you will always get that 4 damage. Really nice game closer. And lastly, we have 3 copies of Ewing Reinforcement. Now, Ewing in this deck versus other Rebel lists is a little bit interesting because we are hitting all of those Spectre units. We can have a lot of very powerful pulls. For example, you can pull Chopper plus Ghost. That's a really powerful Ewing, as you probably will have a Zeb or Kanan out since you did play that a couple turns before, or maybe you don't, and you just get to put the shield on Chopper and get that Spectre synergy rolling. You could also just pull something like Sabine plus Zeb, Ezra plus Kanan. You can go Sabine, Ezra, Battlefield Marine, and now you have an untargetable Sabine. You can go Fleet Lieutenant Sabine, Chopper, or Fleet Lieutenant Sabine, Battlefield Marine. You have many, many different combinations of hits that are very powerful. Or, you know, getting that Sentinel out, trying to get your Kanan online. Wing Leader is a really nice one, as you can just pump something up, such as you go Wing Leader Kanan. Now you have a 6/7 Kanan, which is really annoying to deal with. It's basically like build your own Luke. There are very, very powerful hits, and this is one thing that gives you a lot of game against some of the more mid-range decks, which is really, really cool. That's going to wrap up the events. Let's finish it off by talking about the sideboard. So when we move on over to the sideboard, you might notice one odd color card in the sideboard, and that is Spark of Rebellion. This is the 7th Spectre card that we do have, and it is a really powerful sideboard card, particularly against Boba, as one of the big downsides of fighting or playing with Boba is the fact that Boba relies on a good mix of units and spells, and they oftentimes will resource things so that they have that, right? If you play Spark Rebellion, you can really disrupt that, especially if you just need to get to that mid game, as this deck does start to actually outpace Boba, because you start getting a lot of value out of the Ghost and Kanan and Zebs and things. You start picking off a lot of things, but you need to be able to get there, as they have a lot of tempo plays to disrupt you. And if you could pull their turn 1 play out of their hand, or maybe they pull their distribution of events and units out of their hand, like you take their Crafty Smuggler on turn 1 and they can't, you know, surprise strike your units for a lot of value on turn 2, then you really are in a good situation. 3 copies of Admiral Akbar. This synergizes really well with Tarkin Town, and also since we do have like Chopper and Ewing reinforcements, this can come down as just a straight up removal spell. 1 copy of Echo Base Defender and Bright Hope in the sideboard, as these are sentinels that come in against more aggro oriented matchups. Very, very nice to finish off the playset of Echo Base Defender, and an additional copy of Bright Hope. And last, you have 2 copies of Traitorous, as this is really powerful against Boba, against aggressive decks, and just being able to steal something to get you a little bit more value and put you back on that aggressive plan. Overall, this is not the most insane deck. It's not even what I would consider like a tier 2 deck necessarily, but it does have game against a lot of varying matchups, as you can get some really nice draws with the Spectre lineup. The biggest problem with this deck, I would say, is the fact that we have Hera as our leader, right? When you look at other leaders in the game, they usually do something before turn 6, with a lot of the 5 drop leaders as they come down, or they just have an action ability as well as something that they can deploy earlier on inside the game. She is both a leader that deploys a little bit later than most other leaders, and does nothing but allow you to play the Spectre synergies. And to be honest, while the Spectre synergies are decent, they are not amazing, right? Most of the time when I look at amazing synergies, I think force synergies, right? The ability to play like force throw, force lightning, force choke, getting cost reduction, such things like that. It could be really, really powerful. If Hera came down a turn sooner as a 5 deployed leader, this deck would actually be significantly better, as the experience token for those unique units, since you do have so many, is actually extremely relevant, because you can go something like Kanan or Zeb into deploy Hera into giving them experience token. But the problem is that you have to wait till turn 5, and that means that you have like the Ghost that comes down, and maybe your units are defeated at that point, or it's just too late and you've been a little bit too slow. That said, it is a very fun list and it is decently strong. And if you have your standard Rebel aggro list, this is a very easy swap, as you basically will have all of these cards with the exception of the Kanans, Zebs, Choppers, and potentially the Ghosts. Although you may have even picked up Kanans, Sabines, and Ezras in other decks. So maybe the only things you don't have are like the Ghost, Zebs, and Choppers. That's what I at least don't have, or didn't have before I was messing around with this list. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed the 5-color Hera list. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we get some sweet new Spectre cards coming in the future sets, because I'd love to return to a 5-color list, and I will see you all for the next video.